so much for convening this, to David and to Forum, Armenia, Policy Forum Armenia, for convening, because it's really an important moment for us to take a look at Armenia and to assess where things stand. And I hope that you will continue to convene with experts in Armenia, with our colleagues who work on human rights, as well as the community here in DC, and of course the diaspora, as the elections approach, because we're really in a very important a moment now. And I was also very grateful for the film that was shown that reminds us of what transpired in 2008. That kind of casts a shadow over everything that has come after. And speaking of accountability, to what degree do we know exactly what happened that night? And has anyone in the end been brought to justice for the shootings? Those were shooting deaths in the aftermath of the elections of 2008. And I thought the film was extremely powerful, and perhaps there could be, in terms of things that might be recommendations, to just label things and maybe make an expanded version that would take you from what transpired in 2008 analytically through the various subsequent protests to the situation this summer. And it does tell a story, an important story of what's been happening in Armenia, and how police brutality, repression have played a big role in the situation. I want to just lay out a couple of general points. First, changing geopolitical context. It has always been difficult for Armenia to maintain good relations with Russia and with the West. At the same time, Armenia depends on Russia for security. Armenia, I was last there in April this year. You could see a change in the way Russia is perceived in Armenia. There's a great deal of disappointment. The U-turn on the association agreement with the EU, where suddenly Armenia had to reverse itself and join the Eurasian Union, Eurasian Economic Union, and then the events this spring where Armenia did not feel that Russia was doing enough to support them, had supplied weapons to Azerbaijan and so forth, and the feeling of betrayal and the feeling of where do we turn, how can we better negotiate our situation is really being felt in Armenia. And I would say, in the Caucasus in general, what we've seen is that the local conflicts erupt during times of geopolitical stress and bigger geopolitical conflicts, such as World War I, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and so forth. And in the heated situation that we have now, we should be especially aware of the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and the other conflict complexes as well. And again, I don't think this is going to be easy for Armenia to navigate. The 6-day war, again, I was in Armenia just a couple of weeks after that. What struck me is how insecure people feel. Every meeting came back to this. The sense that really the war could return. And at the same time, what we all saw on social media is a really, to me, unanticipated degree of enthusiasm in both populations in Armenia and Azerbaijan. There was a readiness to go to war. Volunteers in Armenia took their guns and went to the contact line. The defense ministry had to call them back. Again, no one had to draft them, no one had to arm them, they just went. And this is worrying. This is worrying, and again, the situation this summer, where we saw an armed group seize a police station, and we saw a population that, for various reasons, because the political situation has been so difficult, because the economic situation has been so desperate, a population that understood, to some degree supported, as Jane has described, and there was a kind of Robin Hood effect, frankly. So certainly without condoning violence in any way, shape, or form, I think people shared a kind of frustration. So all of this is extremely worrying as we think about elections coming up and what the ramifications of, again, a population that's disappointed by Russia, disappointed in its own government, frustrated with past elections, frustrated with corruption. One of the achievements, and so it's turning to civil society, Armenia has a very active and outspoken and capable civil society. One of the achievements, I think, is the participation in the Panama Papers and OCC RP, that actually in Armenia, people were dismissed as a result of corruption allegations, corruption in the defense ministry, again, part of the Karabakh situation. And that theme in general is a powerful one, as already was stated by our colleague from TI, the importance of plugging away at corruption work, exposing corruption in Armenia, where it has this powerful resonance. There's interesting developments in kind of grassroots protests, and again, we saw some of those in the film. Very topical, very grassroots. Over a number of years, the biggest one was, of course, Electric Yerevan, but there were others about mining, about the environment, about preservation of neighborhoods. So there's all kinds of interesting grassroots activity going on beyond the large organized, established institutions. And some of that hasn't fully gelled. It's young people meeting to discuss ideas or to plan some kind of very specific local action. It lacks what hasn't, maybe it isn't lacking, maybe it's not necessary, but I actually think it is necessary. It doesn't necessarily connect to a larger political context. It doesn't necessarily connect to political parties or to a vision of how Armenia might change. It's usually around a specific issue. So turning to, I actually spoke already, and I think Jane has covered the situation this summer more than amply. And turning to the election, it really is coming quickly upon us, and it will be here in March. And we're not, I don't feel like the situation is a good one going in. There's little agreement on the election code. There's a lot of lack of unity, be it among the political opposition. There are squabbles going on in civil society. Compared, if you look at the Georgian elections just now and what Georgians were able to do in terms of election monitoring, and I think this is really key, the professional ability to carry out credible, in view of the kind of heated situation in Armenia. It should be incumbent on all of us to pay particular attention to election monitoring, to make sure that there is organized, credible, that there's access, and that the Armenian organizations working on this receive the support that they need, and the conditions in which they can carry that out. And then the last thing I would note, also in terms of David's question about what's needed, there's the NED where I work. We're a family of institutions, and one of the things I note is that NDI and IRI that work with political parties are missing in Armenia, and that is unfortunate, and I hope that may change. That's not something that can be put in place quickly, but hopefully over some period of time, NDI and IRI may come back or start to work, because that kind of work with political parties, with election observation to help coalitions of organizations to do election monitoring. It exists in other places, but it really isn't happening in the same way in Armenia. And that's a type of work that I think could be very productive. But I don't think it can happen before this election. So before this election, something else needs to happen to improve election monitoring. And it might be, frankly, just bringing people from Georgia to do it in Armenia, or using other diaspora resources to try to put monitoring in place.